Hello, everyone. So good to have you with us. My name is Mark Romoff, and I am obviously President and CEO of the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you today to what promises to be a really exciting event, as we'll have a chance to learn firsthand about the details of Ontario's infrastructure pipeline. And I know that this is an issue that's, of course, of interest to everybody. So it's wonderful to have you all joining us today. And obviously, it couldn't come at a better time. And we couldn't have individuals that are more knowledgeable about this subject than, in fact, Ontario's Infrastructure Minister, the Honourable Laurie Scott, and, of course, Ehren Cory, President and CEO of Infrastructure Ontario. So both are with us today, and we'll have a chance, of course, to hear from them in just a short while. I did want to mention, though, that as many of you know, this is our first effort at a virtual event. So it'll have its challenges, no doubt. And I guess that means that anything can happen over the course of the next hour and a half. So hopefully you'll be patient and understanding as we try to learn our way through this. The other thing, which I think is really wonderful, is that we have more than 300 people that are logged on for today's session, coming from obviously Canada, the US, UK, Turkey, Spain, Japan. This again is a reflection of just how much interest there is in learning about what's next on the infrastructure horizon in Ontario, and of course a reflection of really the continuing stellar reputation that Ontario and Infrastructure Ontario in particular have when it comes to P3s in the global world. So that's really wonderful. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bruce Power for helping to make today's event possible. They are our sponsor today. And a special shout out, of course, to James Gagnac, who's VP of Corporate Affairs at Bruce Power. He's here with us today, and in just a few moments, he will be introducing Minister Scott. I also hope that by now, everyone has ordered their lunch from Skip the Dishes and had it delivered. That way we can all dig in and get the most out of our time together today. As I mentioned, this is the first time that we're doing an event like this, so it's going to have its challenges. But also in the spirit, obviously, of social distancing, we're coming to you today from a variety of places. Minister Scott and Ehren Cory are at Queen's Park. I'm here, and it's probably obvious, I'm here at home and enjoying this session from here with my dog Dexter, who's napping at my feet. So in fact, if you hear some snoring, I want you to know it's not me, it is Dexter. He's quite capable when it comes to that. And the rest of our team is scattered across the city. I would, though, like to take a moment to recognize some of the people who don't often get into the limelight, but have really been instrumental to making today's event possible. One is, of course, Jen Bell, who is Minister Scott's Chief of Staff, Zach Postashner, who is the Minister's Director of Policy. Everybody, I think, knows Al Finley, who is VP of Communications and maybe everything else over at Infrastructure Ontario. They're all here in the virtual world today, all instrumental, along with the team, of course, at the Council, who have worked hard to make sure this event today is a success and an experience that works well for all of you. What I will say is that, as you know, we're continuing to adapt to a new work environment. It's posed some challenges and also some opportunities. So we'll welcome your feedback on today's event. But it's also important because, as many of you know, we at the Council are working hard to identify new and interesting ways to engage with our 355 members. As many of you know, we've been hosting now weekly conference calls on COVID-related issues, as seen through the eyes of different speakers in different sectors of the economy. And we've had literally hundreds of participants join us for what have been really some very interesting sessions with some really terrific speakers. And we'll return to that conference call initiative next Thursday, and stay tuned for an announcement as to who will be our guest presenter at that time. Another exclusive that we put in place for our members is the daily news clippings we send out every morning at around 10 a.m. We also started this in early April to help keep our members in the loop on issues of importance across Canada and, for that matter, around the globe. For those of you who today are with us but aren't members, can't help myself, I encourage you to think about joining, and you can get more information on our website at ppbcouncil.ca, www. One more update. I'm pleased to confirm that we will, in fact, be going ahead this year with our annual conference. People have been asking. We're working on that now. And again, as you can appreciate, it won't be our typical gathering of 1,000 people in Toronto from 30 countries, but we will have news coming out to you very shortly around the nature of our event and the program. So stay with us on that. It's our 28th year, rather, of hosting that event. We're also working hard at trying to find innovative and fun ways to make a virtual event like the conference and like today as impactful as possible. So today is a good idea, a good case in point where we tried to be a little more innovative and thoughtful, engage Skip the Dishes in our luncheon event. And so I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that partnership. And hopefully you'll find that this was an interesting initiative and that you got a decent lunch out of it. So look forward to getting feedback on that as well. Now, today's event is, as you know, a follow-on from the one we did last September, our pipeline event with Minister Scott and Ehren at the Arcadian Court in downtown Toronto. And at that time, Ontario committed itself to providing quarterly updates on the pipeline to the sector. And true to their word, they've done that. There was an update this winter. And now here we are again with Minister Scott and Ehren to get a peek at what's on the agenda going forward now. So it's very timely, as you know, especially in light of the current situation we're facing and the current economic climate, where infrastructure continues to be a vital element of the recovery and of the economy more generally. And Minister, it's wonderful again to have you with us. You know how much the Council appreciates collaborating with you and your team to provide a venue like today to get an important message across to your key stakeholders. So thank you again for allowing us to partner with you on this one. And as I mentioned, also joining us today is Cory, President and CEO of Infrastructure Ontario. I can promise you that it'll be an informative talk today. And there'll also be opportunities for you in the audience to ask questions. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And I'm guessing that with the minister's remarks, there will in fact be lots of questions. So immediately after the minister delivers her remarks, she and I and Ehren Cory will enter into a fireside chat, which I'm going to host. And we'll be exploring a couple of issues which I think are topical and will be of interest to everyone in the audience. But after that, we've also set aside some time for a Q&A with the audience. And I'm hoping that, in fact, you'll have questions that you'll want to ask, either the minister or Ehren, or both. And so the way that's going to work today, to make it simple, if you do have a question, please email me directly at mromoff@pppcouncil.ca. So that's MROMOFF@pppcouncil.ca. I'll get those questions and I'll be happy to pose them to the minister and to Ehren. So I'd now like to turn the microphone over to James Sconiac. As I mentioned a bit earlier, James is Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Bruce Power, and Bruce is our sponsor. Bruce Power is our sponsor of today's event. So James, over to you. I'm hoping this will be a relatively smooth transition from me to you.
I really appreciate the opportunity, Mark, to from a Bruce Power perspective to support today's event. I think the work that the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships does and is going to do is going to be more important than ever as we focus on economic recovery. So I would like to put a plug in for the council and your important work. Obviously, organizations like the council need the support of all of us as members and supportive events. And given the fact we're in a COVID-19 environment, some of the traditional events such as lunches and the annual conference are going to be somewhat challenged. So, just as all of us as members, it's really important we continue to support Mark and his team and the council during this critical time, because even though we can't get together as much as we would like in person, obviously this policy work is more important than ever. Just before I go into the introduction of the minister, and I really appreciate her and Ehren taking the time to join us today. For those of you that aren't familiar with Bruce Power, we are Canada's largest public-private partnership and the largest private sector funded infrastructure program in the country. What we often say, Minister, is we're only able to carry out the work that we're doing on site, even in the context of COVID now, where we have COVID protections in place and workers safely coming to work, executing work with all the appropriate health and safety measures. And I know that's important to you, not only your role as Minister of Infrastructure, but also your previous role as Minister of Labor and what safe and healthy workplaces are all about. But now more than ever, as we're in a COVID world and we're looking to protect the health and safety of our workers and grow our economy and make good long-term infrastructure investments, I think it's safe to say we're going to really rely on public-private partnerships to do that. And, we're really going to have to work with all levels of government, including the federal government, who has a number of policy tools available, like the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and to not so much looking at what infrastructure projects are out there that are not viable, but what are the things we can do to leverage the ones better that are viable and underway, and how do we strengthen those supply chains? So I'm honored to be here from Bruce Power today. And not only are we investing in infrastructure, but generating electricity for the next 50 years and a supply of medical isotopes. And I really want to thank again Mark and his team for their leadership and their support of our infrastructure project and our public-private partnership. I know Minister Scott does not need an introduction to this group. She's supported the council over many years, both in her time as Minister of Labor, but also even prior to being in government as a member provincial parliament for many years, elected by huge margins in her constituency. So not only somebody that has contributed in the ministerial portfolio, but somebody that really involved in a grassroots manner in her often largely rural-based riding, and dealing with a lot of those critical local issues. I believe, Minister, it's almost a year since you were appointed infrastructure minister by Premier Ford. And I think that's just great. It's an absolutely critical time for infrastructure, and infrastructure is going to be one major contributor to our ability to recover from COVID, but most importantly, not just recover from COVID, but ensuring that the investments that we're making today will have long-term economic benefits to our communities, to our economy, and to the province. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Minister Scott and pass it over to you, Minister. I'm not sure if this was passed over to Minister Scott. There we go. I think we're coming in Queen's Park. There you go, Minister.
Well, thank you so much, James, for that introduction, and always happy to work with Bruce Power and all their historic P3 involvement in keeping our lights on. So I appreciate that immensely, and I say good afternoon to our worldwide audience. I don't think, Mark, you told me that I was going to have such a global audience today, but that's fantastic. It is true, James. It's about a year since I came into this portfolio. And of course, I have great enthusiasm for P3 models and for infrastructure. So it is hard to believe we were together in person not too long ago at the C2P3 conference in November. I can't tell you how much has changed in our world since then. So I am grateful for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I want to take the opportunity to thank Mark Romoff and his team at C2P3, Ehren Cory and his team at IO, and everyone who helped organize today's virtual event. This is not only an opportunity for me to share updates on behalf of the Ontario government, but also for us to talk about some of your questions. We want to hear what is on your mind. But first, I want to start by providing you with an update on where we are today. We are still committed to our ambitious pipeline, moving forward with major infrastructure projects that invest in communities and create jobs. And we remain firmly committed to using the P3 model where it makes sense to make those projects a reality. I've spoken to many of you at previous events about Ontario's commitment to P3s. But today's spring 2020 P3 market update, which includes the latest on timing and delivery for the projects announced in last fall's pipeline, is an important signal to the market. This is stimulus that will contribute to the economic recovery of our province. The fall pipeline invested more than $60 billion in civil, healthcare, and community safety projects across Ontario. The pipeline is the largest it has ever been, and to my knowledge is unprecedented globally. This is a statement to the strength of Ontario's unique P3 model. It is proven, internationally recognized approach that gets projects done well and supports thousands of jobs. All of this key to the economic recovery of Ontario. In fact, our partnership with you is critical to the economic recovery. Of course, the last few months have not been an easy time, but we continue to work together to make historic investments across the province. As announced earlier this month, we are moving forward with the Ontario Line, the signature project in the largest subway expansion in the province's history. This spring's market update includes transit RFQs that are out for the Ontario Line, which is being built under 3 separate P3 contracts, 2 of which are already in active procurement, and all 3 have clear dates for close. RFQs are out and closed for the tunneling portion of the Eglinton Crosstown West and Scarborough subway extensions. Civil works procurement is underway with bidders, and we have clear dates for the Scarborough subway. These projects have garnered great interest for bidders around the world, and I also want to highlight that this spring's update includes 2 new highway projects. And the Minister of Health is reconfirming its commitment to the projects as outlined in IO's January 2020 market update. Ontario remains a place that infrastructure will make a big difference, so we're committed to these projects. Now, more than ever, we must continue to invest in our communities. As always, we must preserve what has made us successful, but we must also continue to adapt. That is why the P3 model's inherent flexibility, adaptability, and innovation is so important. I know these market updates are important to you as they help you organize your time and resources, and they also help to make sure Ontario attracts competitive bids for its P3 infrastructure projects. And that is why last September, I committed to providing you with updates 4 times per year. As you will remember, the last market update was in January. The next market update is planned for this fall and will provide a more comprehensive update. Also, don't forget, if you want to find out more about projects and communities across Ontario, you can visit our Ontario Builds map on our website. I look forward to continue to work with you to deliver infrastructure solutions for Ontarians. The project in this pipeline will make life better for residents and position communities to thrive once again. So thank you for listening to me for this short time. And I know that Mark is excited about our Fireside Chat. So if technology permits, Mark, it's over to you. Maybe I spoke prematurely.
There we go.
Hi, Minister. Can you hear me? Great. Good to have you. Thank you very much. And I think everybody who's online can also see now that they can take a look at the pipeline by clicking on link at below your lovely standing right there in front of a microphone. They can see it right between, actually it's between you and me. So it's great to thank you for those opening remarks, Minister. I'm also happy that we have Ehren Cory with us, who's sitting probably, there you go, right on your right. Good to have you there, Ehren. You're looking great. And so we're going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes just in a bit of a fireside chat, to the extent that we can have a fireside chat in an environment like this. So we really have to think virtually. I can feel it already. It's great. We'll then actually, as I mentioned earlier, have the opportunity to take questions from the audience. So once again, if you do have a question, if you could send an email to me directly at mromoff@pppcouncil.ca. I'll be happy then to pose those questions to both the Minister and to Ehren. So, Minister, let's start with an obvious question, because we're all very focused on the reality of COVID. And so I'm just wondering, given that COVID-19 has had really a devastating impact right across Canada and across virtually every sector of the economy, and this, of course, has been the case in Ontario too, we know that. And not surprisingly, addressing this issue has been the #1 priority of Premier Ford and all members of the cabinet. So I'm wondering, Minister, I know this is very much a work in progress, but could you comment briefly on the impact of the pandemic on the infrastructure sector and your initial thinking, if you like, on recovery plans for the sector?
Well, today's pipeline release is certainly stimulus, and it's a commitment to our ongoing infrastructure plan that we have. It's $144 billion over 10 years is what we announced last year. In this pipeline here, we've moved forward with the $60 billion P3 commitment with 37 projects on the pipeline. I know that you're all probably loading it in some other device, hopefully quickly, but the pipeline is part of our recovery and renewal process and plan. So we are more than ever committed to the P3 model so that we can help get the economy going and give it the jolt that it needs. I can tell you, as you mentioned, thank you for that acknowledgement, it has been very, very busy since COVID-19. And working with Minister McNaughton, who's not only my predecessor in infrastructure, but is now Minister of Labor, we have put a priority for our construction plans and projects. And I have to do a shout out to the construction groups that have had adapted to the new processes that need to take place so that we're all safe. And that has been the foremost priority. But we've learned a lot. They've been very successful, and we are very pleased that we have continue to, have done the major constructions provincially, but also that our commitment to P3s is really the proven path toward economic recovery and stimulus. And I know probably Ehren would like to comment on what he's been hearing out there. So Ehren, if you would like to jump in.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to imagine seeing you, because I can't actually see you, but nice to be with you. Minister, I want to start. This is obviously a conversation, Mark, about the pipeline and forward looking, but maybe just to start where the minister left off and echo, it has been amazing to see the response of our industry in the last few months. Because as you say, COVID has had an impact across all of our sectors in construction, obviously, but to see whether that's at the industry association level. So just a real shout out to the OGCA or the Construction Design Alliance, the Road Builders Association, all of the industry groups who have come forward with suggestions of how do we keep projects moving, both the stuff that we're already building, but also the pipeline. And we put out, as many of you know, and we'll talk about it more during this chat, of course, we put out an RFQ for the biggest project on our books, the Ontario Line, 2 RFQs 2 weeks ago. And if you'd asked us 2 months ago if that was possible, we probably said, well, it's COVID. No one has the time or the focus to worry about or to get onto procurements of new projects. But the industry's really stepped up in a great way, and they've shown us, all of us are adapting to technology like this, but all of us are also adapting to new construction realities and how do we get things built. And I'll just say also, how do we take advantage of some of the opportunities that get created? We've less traffic than ever right now. There are silver linings in some of these, in the progress we're making in construction, but also in due diligence that allow us to get the pipeline out and moving. So as the minister said, so that's just a comment about where we find ourselves now, Mark. So as we look forward, yeah, our view is that remember, it was only 6 months ago in January or last September, Mark, when we did our event, the number one question was, how are you going to get all this work done? Do we have the capacity? And so now when people ask about stimulus, I think the minister is right. We say this pipeline is stimulus. It is part of recovery. It is, if we can do the work that we've set out for ourselves, it's going to be jobs, and it's going to have people working and moving and stimulate both our construction industry and eventually the economy. So yeah, we think it fits really well into that overall turnaround effort.
Thanks, Ehren. That's really helpful. And Minister, again, thanks for outlining some of the key features of the spring market update. It truly is reassuring to see the historic level of commitment to P3s. And again, that the government announcement of last fall at more than $60 billion. That's a pretty significant commitment. That said, though, I know there are some concerns at the moment around specific announcements and the cancellations, for example, of the Hamilton LRT project and the Halton Courthouse project. Can you speak a little bit to these concerns that some of the industry may have about what those cancellations mean for other projects in the pipeline?
Absolutely. Mark, and look, none of these decisions were taken lightly. They were very hard decisions. By the pipeline today, you can see we continue to be committed to the model of P3. That is no reflection on the cancellation that you had mentioned. So, even during this global pandemic, Ontario, and thanks to Infrastructure Ontario, to Ehren and his team, and working with our line ministries, transportation, health, et cetera, across the government, we put new projects on the pipeline. So I thanks for that dedication and continued hard work that has gone on for many, many hours and days and weeks and now months. But it's a definite signal to the market that Ontario is committed to the P3 model. And I know the Halton Courthouse is certainly top of mind. When the pandemic hit, we had to change the way that we were functioning. There was talk of changing to a different array of services remotely. This change had to happen quickly. So the Ministry of the Attorney General decided to shift the resources from a physical infrastructure investment to digital investments. So, the additional space that would have been created through the Halton Courthouse project was no longer needed and would be invested somewhere else. But the ministry has made it clear, as I said before, this is not a change in the needs of the P3 models, and it was really more of a comprehensive justice strategy. All that is going to be coming out from the Ministry of Attorney General this fall. So stay tuned. We're still working hard and have lots in the hopper. In relation to Hamilton LRT in late 2019 and that cancellation, there was a fiscal reality involved with that it was going to cost 5 times more than the province had originally believed. And, we notified the proponent teams that were bidding on the projects. We have a break fee policy outlined in our RFPs, and those teams will receive compensation according to their involvement in the procurement process. But, the Ministry of Transportation got together a Hamilton Transit Task Force. They have concluded their report and they've provided it to the Ministry of Transportation. And we are, waiting for them to decide with the task force, which was all locally developed. But we are still committed to our $1 billion investment to the people of Hamilton and the transit needs that we can help them deliver on. Ehren, I don't know if you want to add any more. I mean, you don't have to.
No, that was great. I would just say one thing, maybe, Minister, which is we've always, my predecessor, Bert, when he was leading IO, had this expression he always used, which was measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
And we've always tried to follow that, do good planning, do our homework, work really closely with our partners in transportation and health, Attorney General, and others to design great projects and then take them through. And that still remains our mantra. And that's the kind of work we do in the pipeline. But I think you said it right. The world also is a fast changing place. And I think with you, when you talk about Halton, obviously the event of COVID and the Ministry of the Attorney General really rethinking how they best deliver service and how they best invest their money, that's good. That's good policy. And so at the tail end of that, on the execution side, we have to adjust to that and be nimble to it. And I hope our partners in industry understand that. I'm glad you mentioned break fees, and we never want a project to stop, but if it does, we also will always live up to our obligations. The pipeline this time, again, just like always, we've done our due diligence and our work with those partners across government to really confirm the business case behind the asset and why it's going forward and why it's on here. But as I said, it is also a really complex and changing world. So we have to be ready for that while always trying to do our best to be diligent and measure twice, cut once.
If I could follow up just a little bit on this, Ehren, and I apologize if I'm looking up because the questions are coming in on my desktop and I'm working on my laptop. So it's not like I'm not interested in what you guys are talking about. I'm trying to figure out what's coming in. And I have had a question on the Halton project because, as you know, shovels were to have been in the ground pretty much right after, in fact, the project was canceled. So is there another plan for Halton? Is there any thinking going on there? And again, I know this puts you on the spot a little bit, and if you need to take a pass, I get that. But I'm just wondering what the thinking is now.
I think the minister actually mentioned, Mark, that Ministry of the Attorney General is working on their overall strategy. And for us as a delivery partner for MAG, it's our job to help them understand asset construction and what projects might come out of that. But that's really starts first and foremost with them and how they view the administration of justice and how that translates into assets. So no, nothing new to say about the plans, but other than to say that's our work over the coming months. It's MAG's work and the Ministry of Infrastructure and IO as a small part of that to help figure out what the future projects might be.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. Let's shift to another area. So last year we saw IO and Metrolinx redesign the project delivery model for Union Station to an alliance model rather than a conventional P3. With the types of different projects and different risk profiles you're taking on for different projects, I'm guessing you're looking at different ways to deliver these projects in the best way possible. Does this mean that we'll see more projects from IO that aren't sort of traditional P3s or P3s of the kind that we've normally been talking about?
Yeah, I guess it's funny, Mark, isn't it? And even you just corrected yourself because you said, typical P3s or traditional P3s. And then we realized the spectrum that they are. James did our intro. He's the largest P3. And many of us don't talk about Bruce Power, for instance, in that way. What I'm trying to say is P3s do run a really big spectrum. I come back to this. We actually we don't wake up in the morning saying, how do we do more P3s? We wake up saying, how do we get more infrastructure built in protection of taxpayers? And I've said this to you many times, and I'm a member of the council and I believe in the P3 model, but I don't believe in it because I like P3s. I believe in it because I like the outcomes of new infrastructure built on budget as quickly as possible. And with a long-term performance arrangement between the public and private sector. Those are the principles of what we're after, right? Get it built quickly and cost effectively and at high quality for the long term. And P3s are excellent for that, but they can take a lot of flavors, Mark. And you look at the Ontario line and the way we've divided that project up, and some people say, oh, you've split it into pieces. And yeah, we've done actually, we think, a really thoughtful exercise. We met with the market starting at, I can't even remember, but we did a big round of it last November at your conference and have continued since then to really talk through what is the right structure, balances risk with cost, meets the principles I described around long-term performance partnership, aligned incentives and skin in the game, something built on cost and on quality for the long term. And the model we've come up with the civil infrastructure done as DBFs, and then a long-term, what we call the RSSOM, the long-term signaling systems, rolling stock operations and maintenance contract, which is the 30-year performance contract that sits across that, we think does the job of balancing. It's not a traditional, in the IO sense, traditional P3. It's not a DBFM and here we go. It's more complicated than that. And so, yes, long answer, Mark, but I think you are going to continue to see us being thoughtful about models and adapting while sticking true to our core principles, adapting what the P3 looks like for the specifics of the projects, because they are more, you can say as a rule, the new projects we're doing are larger, more complex than they used to be, and in risky environments and risky with challenging circumstances that we need to balance with our private sector partners.
Thank you. Can I come back to you, Minister, for a moment?
Sure.
You made reference to the pipeline, and while the pipeline does have some new highway projects, which you referenced, and confirms the approach on the Ontario line, it really appears to be more a confirmation of what the government had previously committed to. So what should we expect to see from the province and IO in the fall pipeline?
Well, we always want to get out ahead of the news. I know it's exciting, but as Ehren has so eloquently said, the P3s, the beauty is they're very adaptable, right? Right tool, for the right job. What's the risk? What's the market telling us? You can see that we're committed today to these projects that are on the pipeline, and that, the fall is coming, and we're working with our line ministries, getting our feet back on the ground. I think every week it feels better here in Ontario anyway, if I can say that to our global friends out there, sending the signal also to our global friends that, we're open for continuing infrastructure builds, ideas. We have the USP, the Unsolicited Proposal portal that you can send ideas into. And as terrible as this pandemic has been and continues to be as we adapt, there's also great opportunities. And, we heard from the Ministry of the Attorney General on that. So when I was in Washington, D.C. Last December, which seems years and years ago now, the appetite was fantastic for P3s, the success we've had. Ehren's team's well known down there, a global mix and conversation that we know is going to continue to go forward. So I can say to you that stay tuned, but Premier Ford is committed to build, and I certainly am as Minister of Infrastructure, and Infrastructure Ontario is a very big part of our success here, globally, internationally, in the States. So don't want anybody to go away.
Thank you.
We'll be staying
No.
tuned.
You know how strongly we share that view at the council. So as a corollary, maybe this is something I can ask Ehren about. So it's with respect to healthcare. So if you look again at the healthcare pipeline now, it simply reflects what, in fact, was in the January update, at least given a quick look at that. So I'm just wondering, and the footnote says stay tuned, right? Again, for the fall update.
That's right.
So I'm wondering if you can give us a bit more background on this.
You've already read the footnotes even, Mark. You're fast.
That's why I'm squinting and looking to the right.
Yeah, look, it's funny. Obviously, the success of P3s in Ontario and the creation of IO is so closely tied to healthcare, isn't it? And our partnership with the Ministry of Health and with over 40 hospitals now across Ontario. So that was and remains sort of at the core of what IO does. As the minister said, our job is always to partner with those line ministries, in this case, health and the many hospitals. And they are obviously, as a client of ours, in an incredible period of flux, aren't they? And by the way, on the front lines of doing incredible work for us. So I doubt any of them are watching, but if they were, huge shout out to my many partners in hospital CEOs and heads of development at hospitals who are thinking about the future. We had lots of conversations with them over the last few months about what changes to the pipeline might look like for health projects you might want to accelerate to add capacity, projects that might need to be delayed because those hospitals are right in the thick of dealing with COVID. We've also, of course, Mark, as some of you may know, been doing work with our hospital partners in the here and now, adding temporary facilities. Those things don't show up on the pipeline, of course, but we have built repurposed existing facilities, opened floors of buildings that were previously closed, put up temporary structures. And so that has trumped some of the conversations around exactly what's the timing for the next development. So I think it's safe to say that by the fall, there will be some adjustments to certainly to dates on the healthcare projects. I can imagine some might be earlier as we try and accelerate delivery. Some might be pushed out as those hospitals try and resequence and plan for how do they get through current the pandemic and then into construction. So we put the footnote just to be realistic, but if we waited until we had answers to all those things, we also wouldn't be giving the market an update for what felt like too long. So the minister worked with her colleagues and directed us to go ahead. And we think this is the right thing to do. It gives the market, everything we know. And and we do have really great lines of dialogue open with health about how timing and sequencing might change. And so as the footnote says, stay tuned for more on that in the fall. But, it is important to note if keeping the dates as they are does send a signal that as of right now, we remain full speed ahead on the planning for all of these projects. You would find a team at IO working on these projects, getting them ready for market, and the province build remains the instruction to us. So the footnote is meant to say, yes, there'll be some resequencing, some shuffling to happen, but also in the main, this remains the commitment of the government and the pipeline that we are working towards.
Yeah, that's really important. It's easy to criticize, and part of the challenge sometimes with revealing all is you reveal all, right? And then that just presents questions to people, and I get that. I mean, the reality is, and I think people on this call would all recognize that the approach that Infrastructure Ontario takes with respect to transparency is pretty much unparalleled in the world, right? I mean, you lay it all out there, and the good news is that the project pipeline is there, and it's obvious. It begs some questions sometimes, fair enough. But the reality is that, and we've talked about this many times, I know about just how good IO's global reputation is, certainly for delivering on P3s, but I would say also for your approach around engagement with stakeholders, transparency. Sorry, I'm looking for a job in IO, I guess, right? I don't really know. But it's a reality that we should all appreciate. So thank you for answering the question. But to be fair to everybody, it's pretty remarkable to have it all out there in the public domain. Minister, you mentioned a little bit earlier unsolicited proposals. I did get a question. I think we've actually now probably moving to the question and answers because I got a whole long list of questions coming in from people. So if you're comfortable with that, maybe I could pose a few of these to you. And it is about unsolicited proposals, which you made reference to. So the question is, how does the unsolicited proposals portal work at the ministry? And have there been any applications or any action, I guess, under that new initiative by the government?
So I will pass it over to Ehren in a minute or so to give you maybe the number if we both remember it. That was last year. We launched that too. And we did have a great number, not like flood of 1,000, but a good solid number of proposals that came through there and affecting all line ministries. So when we have the portal, Ministry of Infrastructure does look at the one page. It's just like one page application for everybody. Doesn't cost any money, just to do the initial information that we need. We then sort it there and send it over to a line ministry after there's an in-depth look at it. So it doesn't, as I said, highlight doesn't cost anybody any money, but that is that first blush of, is there something we can work with? Is the appropriate ministry interested? And then, what do we need for follow-up? So we've had some very unique ideas, and I'll pass it over to Ehren to, explain maybe a number, not in detail, but explain a number that have come in. And, it's worked very well. Yeah. So Ehren, I'll stop talking, let you speak.
Thank you. So as you described, Minister, that process has been working really well since the fall. Ministry of Infrastructure screens, engages with whoever the line ministry is. I only gets involved downstream of that if the line ministry and the Ministry of Infrastructure together agree this is an idea worth pursuing. There's something here. So we don't actually see the start of the funnel, if that makes sense. Yeah. By the time we do, we're engaged with whoever the asset owner or the line ministry would be. It's because they've actually think there's some merit there. We have I'm going to be vague here, but we have about a half dozen right now that I would say are into real substantive discovery and analysis. And you're right, the ideas have been, there's not hundreds and hundreds, but they're really, some of them are big and interesting, innovative ways to address infrastructure gaps. So I think, and we have since, one other thing I'll add, we have since the pandemic received, I know I have heard of at least one or two really interesting ideas that are linked to our response. So that's a great way for ideas to enter into our discussion and then just take the good ones forward.
Thanks for that, Ehren. Now on a different attack, I have a question here about what are you hearing about productivity impacts for craft and trades workers as a result of the new COVID-19 safety protocols?
So maybe I can start. It's fascinating. It's a great question. And what's interesting, Mark, is it depends. I hate to answer, it depends, but it depends so much. It depends on the type of project. Highway projects are very different just in their nature, people in equipment versus in confined spaces compared to a building. It also varies a lot based on stage of project. So we have had some contractors say to us, it's barely impacted us at all. We're in excavation. All of us are in big diggers and dump trucks. We're far from each other. Actually, with less traffic on the roads, we're making hay. And we've had others who've said it has a huge impact because we are trying to work in tight quarters. We've got a crew in a mechanical room, penthouse room, and they can't all be in there. So it has a real different impact depending on stage of project and type of project. What I would say is what we've seen already in the 3 months is a lot of adaptation for the people who it is impacting, a lot of adaptation, changes to work practices, extended hours, staggering of shifts. Like we've seen all of the sort of ingenuity of folks come to bear. We had a meeting recently with a contractor. I won't name who, but they were having impacts, and they said, give us 3 weeks. We're going to come back to you with a plan. And 3 weeks later, we had a meeting with them, and they outlined, okay, so here's how we've staggered our shifts. Here's what we're doing for lunch breaks. Here's how elevators are being used. Here's how we're spacing people out. Here's how we've added hand washing stations. We're good. We can recover the schedule, and we're okay. And so that's been great to see. But I would just say, Mark, it varies across projects.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have another interesting question here. What role will community benefits play during the development of this historic infrastructure investment? There's an opportunity to achieve multiple objectives with this stimulative funding of infrastructure.
Do you want me to go?
Do you want me to answer the minister? Maybe?
Okay, I'll take it. Absolutely. I mean, we all know infrastructure is a community benefit to everyone in our communities and strengthening our communities. So not only is infrastructure going to help us recover, it is certainly, may change. As Ehren has said, there's been some things come in from the USP portal. Since then, ideas are churning, but it re-solidifies our commitment to what our pipeline is. Few adaptations. We're listening to the market. What can we do? I talk to my federal counterpart, Minister McKenna, weekly with the Minister of Transportation. So we get updates. We throw ideas around what we've been hearing. I speak with all the other provincial ministers of infrastructure also to see if we're on the same page. Flexibility comes out, flexibility from the federal government, flexibility from CIB. We've seen some opportunities that might arise that we can all work together on. So it's a constant conversation that we have, But there's no question, community benefits, however you interpret them to be, the infrastructure pipeline delivers that in spades. And I don't know if Ehren wants to summarize maybe what is new on the pipeline for those. Some are reading now. I don't know if there's, some of the changes just to highlight in case people had trouble with downloading. I know I'm in the city today, but I live in rural Ontario usually. So sometimes my picture fades. So I don't know, Ehren, if you wanted to give a quick little summary maybe of what the changes are for that new pipeline they just got their hands on.
Sure, I'm happy to. And maybe, Minister, could I also, on the question of community
course.
benefits, could I talk about transit-oriented communities a little bit? Because
Of course.
I think
Sorry.
one of the areas, it's not in the pipeline, but it is a form of P3. And you'll see it's mentioned in the letter that we post along with the pipeline for folks following along. But our work on development nodes around our transit program, I think is a way that we're thinking about the more holistic benefits of our projects, making sure we're not just building transit lines, but we're actually building communities, and that makes sense. It's been a big push of Phil's at Metrolinx, and that's a real partnership where we're working at every one on the Ontario line and the Eglinton West, Scarborough, and on the Yonge North line, all of the subway lines, as well as a number of places on the GO network. What's the kind of development and inclusive development you could have around those stations? So I think that's going to be a big part of what we build going forward, and that's, I think, an important part of the community benefit story too. The Minister, to your question, I think the things that I just call out, you mentioned some of them in your speech, but if you're looking at the pipeline, the three big changes, number one is just the transit, and in particular the subway work now being fleshed out. So if you look in the pre-procurement, you'll now see the coming work for the Ontario line and Scarborough and Eglinton West, the future procurements. But if you flip the page to the projects in procurement, you see the RFQs that have already gone out and closed on Scarborough and Eglinton West, and the two Ontario line ones that went out on June 2nd. So that's big change number one is, and for us, it was, you've been the minister about a year, as James said in his intro. It's been 13 months. It was May of last year when the Premier announced the 4 subway projects. And to have them go from that to live procurements, it's kind of gone from concept to reality in that year. And so that's change number one if you look throughout this pipeline. Number two is around the highway projects. Last September, I remember a question from the audience. It was one of the few that I remember very clearly, was from a road builder who said, I don't see a lot on the highway side here. And so there are 2 new projects. I like them. I think you do too. They're spread out well. I like them because they reach more of the geography of Ontario.
Yep.
I'm from Northern Ontario, so Highway 17 is a road I've spent too much time on in my life. So to have some new highway projects here is really important. And I think it speaks to the partnership we've got going with MTO on just a whole bunch of things, looking at longer term planning with MTO and how do we look at MTO's got a 10-year capital view of what's the future stuff they need to build. And so we're working with them much earlier to figure out which of those projects, how big are they and which projects make sense as P3s. And that's exciting. And then I guess, Minister, the thing that hasn't changed that we already talked about, but it's on my list, is the healthcare, just that there's that commitment to those healthcare projects with the asterisk that, timing might shift, but the projects remain viable and important. So those are the big changes if you flip through the 2 pages that I would call out.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ehren. It's a good read. Coming back to you, Minister, because you mentioned an issue that you experience where you're living, and that's a little bit of unreliability around internet or broadband. It's a big issue, right? And it's really come into high relief these days since we're virtually all working at home and all experiencing a little bit of unevenness around that need, and it because it's a need, of course, it's frustrating. So all of a sudden, it's really sort of jumped to almost to the top of things that fall in the infrastructure gap. I know this has been an issue, real concern to the government and to you personally. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what's happening on the broadband front, and because connectivity is such a significant issue.
Absolutely. COVID-19 has certainly magnified the need for the broadband. Last fall, we announced, I guess last summer, I should say, a $350 million broadband investment. So we have a southwestern Ontario, we have eastern Ontario, we have some different ministries as well as us in northern Ontario. And just 2 weeks ago, I announced our $150 million program for unserved and underserved. So that's, very low or no internet to help with that patchwork quilt. It's, is it enough? We say no. Will we do more? We say yes. And no question, I'm passionate and live it every day pretty much that, the rural Ontario bandwidth. But this is, to still stimulate, we hope, over $1 billion and more in private investment, and collaboratively we can, accomplish much more. And as we say, faster. And that the federal government, whom I speak to often, this is a huge issue they're hearing too, right? So they had made a commitment. They have a couple programs. We have programs working together with the telecommunications companies to build quicker and faster speeds. And that's why we call the program Up to Speed provincially. But this is federally regulated, as you will know, and telecommunications, the federal government needs to be a huge partner in advancing those technology needs of today, because it has all changed. So very passionate about it, and speak about it daily for sure.
It's great when we all have a vested interest in something, right? It sort of brings out the passion in higher relief. I have another question here. It's an interesting one. So this person says the majority of projects in the pipeline are DBFs. Does this mean that Ontario does not see benefits in long-term P3s?
Go ahead, Ehren.
Sure.
A tough one.
I'll send it to Ehren.
No, it's a great question. No, we absolutely see value in long-term P3s. And I talked earlier, Mark, in one of the answers around the principles that we try and live by, and long-term performance, not just building things cost effectively and quickly, but actually having them be high quality for the long term is absolutely at the heart of what we do. I would always start from an assumption that I would like to have a maintenance period, a long-term partnership on an asset, because it's the right way to get the right alignment from great design through great construction and into maintenance. The reality is, it's horses for courses. You got to pick the right model for every project. And a number of those projects that people are referring to, they are sub-elements of a broader something. So if I'm doing an extension to a hospital, the first question you have to ask is, to what extent does this plug into the existing HVAC system and use the existing telecommunications and nurse call and all of the systems? And if so, do I really want to do it as a separate DBFM when it's part of a bigger asset? When I'm doing a transit project, you look at the Ontario line just as an example, we're doing several DBFs on the civil construction. We're also doing early works projects that are even traditional construction, but all of those then roll into having the RSSOM 30-year contract who's going to integrate and provide that service. So my point there is we absolutely still see the value in the long term. It's got to be right model for right project, and you have to think about them not often as just one project, but the broader program that they're part of, whether that's a hospital, a healthcare campus, and how does what we're building fit into that campus, or a transit project, and how does it fit into an overall program?
Thanks. This next question probably best asked of you also, Ehren. So this person is saying, why does your pipeline call the on-corridor project a DBFOM when this person thought there was no private finance?
So we're working, the Encore project is one of our, along with the Ontario line, they're the two biggest projects and most complex we do. And obviously the Encore work is so unique because of its nature. It is building on the existing GO network. It's a brownfield expansion. The construction period will happen while trains will run, right? So it's what the actual partner we're picking is someone who's going to deliver the service for the long term, while also building out the network and in growing the capacity so that we can get to high frequency, two-way all day service all over the GTHA. So it's a really unique project, Mark. I just start with that. we're in the RFP period, and we're working with the bidders in that project on how do we create the right incentives, what's the right deal structure, what's the right amount of project finance that fits into that. So that's absolutely live and what we're working on with the bidders.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Another question, a common term we see these days is a new normal. Aside from projects themselves, we can assume that this new normal will likely have a much larger impact on how projects are designed and built in an era of social distancing. So this question was wondering if there are any lessons or trends that you've seen so far, or you might be expecting on this front.
Well, it's a great question. I think for us, like, I could take that so many different ways. I think it's going to change everything in the value chain, Mark, from start to finish. So what I mean is from even starting from the project need itself. And the minister talked about Halton Courthouse and MAG re-examining how they deliver services and what role assets play. So there's the new normal will start from thinking differently about the business case or the demand case. But when it comes downstream to me and our team at IO who are looking at delivering those projects, we do see opportunity in jump-starting some of the conversations that have been going on for a long time in our industry around the use of technology, the use of 3D modeling, having a digital twin so that right from the start, we know what we're building. Using some of those tools, I think, will have a lot of benefit, but one of the benefits is they'll help better construction planning and thinking through resource loading and how do we build in a new normal and think about our supply chains in that new normal. So as I say, I'm hoping that it's a catalyst for the introduction of some things that we've been talking about in our industry for quite a while, Mark, on the technology side, so we can get more sophisticated in our planning and in the way we plan materials and people to site so that construction gets done differently. It's a thing that we at IO, as buyers of projects for the province, would love to see happen. We'll look to be at the front of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that. This one's a little more generic, and maybe, Minister, you might be able to answer this one. So with the current COVID pandemic and current upcoming recession, it's an assumption there, is there anticipation of increasing the current provincial investment to stimulate the economy through construction projects?
Well, as I said, the pipeline was very aggressive, 144 billion over 10 years. So it was quite a stimulus package. When I say that, when I'm on these provincial ministry calls, they're all like, you forget Ontario is the most populous, province. And, they all look at us. And I do mention absolutely the over 60 billion in P3s. And I know that Infrastructure Ontario was speaking with Nova Scotia, also giving them a hand on a P3 model. So as we say, it's a good stimulus package to start with. I can't say that I'm shy about asking the federal government if there's some more stimulus that might be coming our way and how we can be creative. So, Minister McKenna has been very good to work with. We're always pushed for more. And I know my counterparts, I know the Premier speaks to the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister often too. And so there's a good coalition of provinces working with the federal government. We'll see what comes out of it. But we can be assured with this big pipeline that we have announced and are reconfirming that we have a very big stimulus package happening right in our own province of Ontario that we are determined to continue with.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for about one or two more questions. So here's a question. This person is saying he's curious as to if and how climate resilience or adaptation is incorporated into the planning and the bidding process. Not sure if that may be a better question for Ehren, but I'll leave it to you guys to decide.
Sure. So it is a reality as we're designing projects now that we have to take sustainability into account. And so to answer the question, if you think of the best place that shows up is on our transit projects, where we are absolutely, we're building assets that are going to last we hope 75 and 100 years. And so you have to build for the long term. It's just good common sense. And so that's what we're doing when we build the Ontario line or when we build any of the subway projects. You have to start from how do you create a long-term robust asset that we're all going to be happy with and proud of. That means you have to think about all of the things we've seen in the last few years, Mark, flood events and that sort of thing. We work really closely with our partners in the municipality, someone like the TRCA, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, to think about those. 100-year storm events, that's the thing, or 50-year storm events that people plan around. And then suddenly you have 3 of them in 5 years. It might not be a 100-year storm event anymore, right? We have to, I think about these things differently. And we work, at IO, we aren't the expert on the asset, but our job is to help ask the right questions and work with asset owners, Metrolinx or an MTO, for instance, to really think about how do we build the right thing for the long term. Oh, you're on mute, Mark, which is I wish I had a button like that I could hit on you occasionally.
Well, let's see if I can unmute myself. I don't appear to be on mute.
No, you're good now.
Good now.
I'm good.
Yep.
All righty. Then let's see if I can find that question again. It's a nice way to try to avoid a question, I'd say, Ehren, Cory. It's actually about education, about the education sector. So not being able to pull up the question now. I know the question was along the lines of, are there plans for using the P3 model in the education sector in Ontario, either over the short term or maybe longer term? Any thoughts on that?
Just a word for me, and the minister might have more to add. All I would say is we have been talking with our colleagues, just like we do with all the line ministries, with our colleagues at education as they think through what their longer term strategy is going to look like. It's kind of like my healthcare story from earlier. We've engaged with them on what's the short term look like. Is there anything we could help with on temporary construction, that sort of thing? And so if we're ready to help if they need us. But in the longer term, I think we will definitely work with them like we do all line ministries to see if there's anything we can do to help them.
Okay. That's great. I think we've probably run out of time. I can tell you that if you had another hour, we could keep you here for another hour. The questions in the queue. And that's a good sign too, I think, for 2 reasons. One, there's clearly huge interest. And I think without overstating, I think people are very respectful of the fact that both you and Ehren are willing to answer the questions. Not all of them are easy. We get that. And it's a difficult time. So I know I speak on behalf of our members and my own board of directors, how much we appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you and with Ehren on an initiative like this, because it truly is important, and it sends an important message, I think, to our membership, and for those, as we pointed out, who are listening in from other parts of the world, who are wondering about opportunities for them in the Ontario marketplace. It's clear that those exist. So again, I thank you and I thank Ehren for making time available today. We really do appreciate it. And as you know, the council stands ready to assist the government in any way they can to help them realize what is a very ambitious program. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I know that we're going to be staying in touch. So I look forward to that. Thank you both very much. I think we're done for the day, and I know that Minister is moving on to another activity as well. But I did want to take a moment again to thank you all for registering for today's event. It's very impressive that we've had over 400 people participate in today's event. And also, I think I really do appreciate the fact that there were so many questions, and I apologize for those that I haven't got to because we just ran out of time. Frankly, it's also challenging trying to look at questions while you're trying to not take your eye off the ball. Anyway, hopefully you'll give me a decent grade on that front. In any event, again, I wanted to remind you that we are in the midst of developing a very ambitious events program for the council this year, including the conference. We'll come back with more information on that shortly. And again, we'll send the notice out shortly with respect to next week's conference call. I look forward to your feedback on how we're doing, frankly, and whether or not you found this session useful, because we'd like to develop a program that ensures that we can really deliver on the interests of our members and for those who are potential members. So please let us know how we're doing, and also obviously initiatives or interests that you have that you think that our programming should address. So thank you again for participating today. Really a pleasure to be able to engage with you this way. And I look forward to having another opportunity to interact with you. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful day.